I think a lot of times people imagine that an inheritance is just going to make other people's lives better. And we know by so much in the way of extensive study that people's problems aren't really solved through money. But a lot of times the reason that we have problems is because we're unhappy with our relationships, and money sometimes exacerbates a lot of that.
It absolutely does. John never intended any of this to happen. He would have hated the thought of his family completely deteriorating because of the success he had, regardless of whether Nathan did it or not. And we'll truly never know. It is a tragedy. It's a situation where 3 people are dead within a 10-year period of time, and that family will never be the same again.
Off we go. This is, I think, the first true delve into the crypt. It's Saturday State of Mind. I'm Mike Panico. I'm joined by Liz Nolin of Nolin Law. And for years, we've been working together. We have tried to build this, we like to think of it as the family office for the millionaire next door, where we can coordinate retirement services and tax services and legal services all in one. And what you do is especially unique because you walk the line, Liz, between life and death. Here we are in your spooky little, I don't know if it's a parlor or it's a laboratory.
I fancy it a parlor.
It's appropriately
Indeed, with my books.
Somber.
Yes.
When we say tales from the crypt, I think sometimes instruction is best made through case study or example. And I know that in your realm, there are no shortage of horror stories.
Yes.
Where sometimes even with the best of intentions, the best estate plans kind of go sideways. So
exactly.
This is our first delve. Here we go into the crypt. I actually don't know what to expect at all.
I know.
I'm a little nervous.
I've kept you in the dark on purpose.
Okay. So you're going to talk to me about Nathan Carman.
Yes.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about the case of Nathan Carman.
This is a real case.
This is a very real case.
Okay.
This case, I did a lot of research into it, and it is filled with the twists and turns of estate planning, which we're going to deal with today. But generally, this also is a really sad case involving really real people and some terrible emotional elements that go along with it. So to kind of start out, I'm going to take you to my home state of Connecticut.
Let's go.
Yes. So first, in around Christmas of 2013, a real estate, we'll call him a tycoon, named John Chakalis was shot and killed in his home.
Oh, goodness.
He had just gone out to dinner with his grandson, Nathan, and he went home, from what I've heard, it's around 9 p.m. And at some point during the night, he was shot with a rifle in the head.
Okay.
And murdered.
In his own home?
In his own home.
Okay.
And his daughter, Elaine, found her father the next morning. He was in a pool of blood. He'd missed an appointment, and she noticed something was really wrong because when she went to his house, he was a really early riser. There was no smell of coffee, no action, nothing.
Okay.
So he had been murdered in cold blood. Then, where this kind of gets really sad, John had a really close relationship with his grandson, Nathan.
This is the guy who's dead, John?
Yes.
Okay.
His grandson was the first grandson he had, and John had 4 daughters. And he loved Nathan so much. He owned a lot of nursing homes. That's actually how he made a lot of his money. He was a big real estate developer down in Connecticut, but he built stuff all over New England. He actually had a vacation home up here in New Hampshire, so he spent a good amount of time up in our state too. He wanted to take Nathan under his wing and teach him about the family business. He'd gone as far as to introduce Nathan, my understanding is, even to financial advisors. So he knew kind of what businesses he was looking at, what kind of net worth his grandfather had, all of that.
He's grooming Nathan to take over the business.
Exactly.
Got it.
And that is the word I absolutely wanted to use, but the connotation, especially with current events, is a little...
That's why I made sure I put full context around it.
So, for lack of better terminology, he was grooming Nathan to take over these businesses.
Got it.
Nathan had a really hard time when he was growing up. There's a lot of elements that I'm not really going to get into, but he didn't have a lot of friends, and he did have a beloved horse. He loved horses, and he spent a lot of time with his horse. And unfortunately, a couple of years before his grandfather died, he lost his favorite horse. And that really sent him into a spiral. And from my understanding is he suffered from a lot of depression. So the loss of his grandfather was really difficult. John Chakalis had done a lot of estate planning. He had a lot of different trusts, and I'm not sure from the research just how many he had. But Nathan, being, really close to his grandfather, was the beneficiary of at least one trust that we know of.
That's not unusual.
Absolutely
if you have
not.
a complicated situation, you might have trusts just to dictate what happens to your business after you're gone,
Exactly.
the personal effects, right? So, okay.
And when I say that John was a wealthy man, based on the information I've seen, it's kind of hard to peg a firm number on what that was. But stories are indicating it was somewhere between $42 and $300 million. So that's a huge range. But even if we're on the lower end of things, obviously he was a very wealthy man, and he was doing a lot of really extensive estate planning to dictate where stuff goes after he died, all the way to making trusts for his grandson.
Okay.
So after John's death, Nathan inherited somewhere in the neighborhood of $550,000.
Okay.
He took that money, and he was going through a lot, obviously losing his favorite grandfather. He purchased a home in Vermont and moved up there. And from what I have seen in research, it looks like he was having a difficult time getting employed. So he really was more or less isolated up in Vermont, but he still maintained at least some relationship with his family.
Okay.
In about 2015, 2016, Nathan got really into fishing. He'd been doing fishing for a while, but he decided to take part of the inheritance he'd gotten from John and purchase himself a fishing boat that he could take out on the ocean. And he spent about $85,000 on that boat. And it was called the Chicken Pox, which I think is a bold name for a boat, but sometimes they're inherited names. But regardless, he bought the Chicken Pox. And
not the best name for a boat I've ever heard.
No, but he started taking this boat out a good amount, and he started doing a couple of modifications to it here and there.
Okay.
Trying to, make it go a little faster, whatever. He was doing his own work on it. In 2016, he decided to go out on a fishing trip with his mom, and they launched off of the coast of Rhode Island, and they were cruising around. They were going toward Block Island. They were actually, I believe, fishing for bass, which is, I'm not a fisherman or care to really be a fisher person, but my understanding is that bass can be pretty big, pretty heavy, and they can be in some, deep-ish water, but you don't have to go out that far to find them.
Okay.
But anyway, Nathan and his mom, whose name was Linda, went out at 11 p.m. They
Seems late.
Seems a little late to me, but again, I'm not a fisher person, so I wouldn't really know. Set out toward Block Island to go on this fishing trip. They ended up losing a signal. Nobody could get in touch with them. And especially Linda was really cautious because she wasn't a huge fan of fishing herself. She really just wanted to spend time with her son. So she made sure that her friends knew, we're going out here. If you don't hear from me by like noon the next day, make sure that you tell somebody because we're going to be back. Like, this is going to be a short trip. After they left, sometime before the next morning, before about noon, something happened to the boat. And the boat actually sank. And a huge search and rescue mission was launched.
Did the pox hit some rocks?
We're not sure what happened, but I doubt it because there's probably no rocks and how deep they were. They actually went past Block Island to an area called Block Channel, which is a very, very deep spot.
I love these details, Liz. You did your homework.
I sure did.
Yeah.
So the search and rescue mission, after this boat went down, nobody could find anyone. Linda's friends were sounding the alarm, calling the National Guard or
either one of them.
Wherever.
They're both gone.
Both gone.
Okay.
6 days go by that all of this search and rescue stuff has happened, and there is really no sign of either of them. 8 days after they went missing, there was a Chinese freighter on the water called the Orient Lucky.
Okay.
And out of nowhere, it saw this weird thing in the ocean, and they went a little bit closer, and it was actually a rescue raft. It turns out it was Nathan on the raft without his mom.
Okay.
And he had survived for the past 8 days off of really what I've seen, protein bars and water. So another reason that I will always have more protein bars in my purse, which holds already everything. But when he was pulled up onto the Orient Lucky, he started getting questioned about what happened, where's your mom, all of that. And for just personal reasons, he didn't do the best with those interviews. And he came off as a little bit cold. But based on his story changing, it got authorities a little bit concerned that potentially he had something to do with his mom going missing.
Okay.
So,
and by the way, is his grandfather's situation still unsolved?
Still unsolved.
Yeah.
It's actually still unsolved to this day.
Okay, so not a great look.
Not a great look
for Nathan. Okay.
So now Nathan is dealing with his favorite grandfather died in 2013. Now his mom has gone missing at sea in 2016. His aunts saw all of this, along with a bunch of other people, including prosecutors, and thought this all seemed a little bit weird. And his aunts started filing lawsuits, trying to stop Nathan from asserting his right to getting a share of John Chakalis' estate.
Okay.
Because in one of his trusts, John had named his 4 daughters as beneficiaries of the trust. Now, these documents are still not available for public inspection because most estate planning documents like trusts are going to be private, which absolutely they should be.
Right.
But just extrapolating from what I can think of, it sounds like it was a per stirpes distribution of the trust, which means if one of the children, of John's children, had passed away, the undistributed share would go to her living child, Nathan being her only living child.
Makes sense.
So his aunts commenced litigation, basically saying he was responsible for both deaths because he wanted to get a piece of his grandfather's fortune, which was estimated somewhere around the ballpark of $7 million. So the police and prosecutors in the state of Connecticut wanted to pursue charges against Nathan for the 2013 killing of his grandfather.
Okay.
Because one weird element to that was John Chakalis was killed with a very specific rifle. And that very specific rifle happened to be owned by his grandson, Nathan, who had purchased it with his grandfather's knowledge. And it's a very rare weapon. He actually purchased it up in New Hampshire because I would guess it's difficult to get in the state of Connecticut.
Fair assumption.
So there were just a lot of factors that made the reasonable person kind of think this is a little bit weird, and maybe he did it for the money. So he was finally arrested in 2022 for the death of his mom.
Yeah.
And the reason that that case was even commenced, it all came back to an insurance claim. Nathan had filed an insurance claim trying to get $85,000 for his boat that had sank. And the insurance company denied the claim because they said he had done edits to the boat that caused it to sink.
Okay.
They even brought the
He
boat.
voided the warranty.
Yes,
Yeah.
pretty much. They even brought the former owner to that trial to testify, to say that when he sold the boat, it was not modified in that way.
Okay.
And it was one of the witnesses' opinions that the modifications Nathan made actually caused the boat to sink.
Okay.
So now we have a case where the unsolved murder of John from 2013 is still going on, but there's this thought that potentially Nathan did it. Then he gets arrested for his mom's death because primarily he did modifications to this boat that made it look suspicious.
So is this a murder or a manslaughter charge?
So it kind of depends based on the state. And this is an interesting jurisdictional case, which I won't get too much into because obviously we're dealing with Connecticut. We're dealing with, this was a sinking off of the coast of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
We're dealing with Nathan living up in Vermont.
Yeah.
But a lot of this actually happened in New Hampshire courts.
Wow.
Because estate planning documents had maybe, I think, originated in this state with jurisdiction updated to Connecticut. There was a death certificate in New Hampshire. John had a vacation home here. So anyway, there was a whole lot of jurisdictional issues. And watching some of the proceedings that happened, at least here in New Hampshire, the presiding judge who dealt with a lot of these issues was really good. And that's just kind of a side tangent. I think the attorneys, especially the ones that I saw handling this case in New Hampshire, I wasn't in the courtroom, but I've seen the testimony that was given. They all conducted themselves with a really great level of grace and integrity. At one point, Nathan was not represented by counsel, and the judge was just so kind to him, just explaining, you should probably have a lawyer involved because this is a civil case, not a criminal one. So get a lawyer.
Okay.
So he ended up being charged with the death of his mom in a criminal capacity. And he was put in prison. He was actually in Keene when he was imprisoned. And unfortunately, he was found dead. Nathan was found dead in his cell in 2023.
Okay.
And it is...
Now, he was in jail during the trial, or was he convicted and put in jail?
No, he was actually held in jail before his trial happened. And he died prior to the trial actually beginning in October of 2023.
Did they deny bail? Why was he in jail?
They did. They thought that he was actually a flight risk.
Okay.
Because of his ownership of weapons. He didn't have a huge tie to the state of Vermont because he wasn't employed at the time. The judge just ruled that it would be safer for him to stay in prison, especially because he had this really contentious relationship going on with his family.
Bad assumption that he was going to be safer there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was the only person in his cell. He was found unresponsive during a routine check by the different police.
What was the cause of death?
Well, the entire cause of death has never really been fully released, but it's presumed that it was a suicide situation.
Okay.
But again, there's always that kind of cloud of, is that really what happened? So we're not 100% sure, but as of right now, leading sources are saying it was a suicide situation. So this is a very cautionary tale of someone who did everything right. John made all of the trust that he ever needed to. He dotted every I, crossed every T. He had multiple attorneys involved in multiple states, but the documents weren't enough. What it ultimately came down to was money and how people behave with money. If we think the worst of Nathan, which after going through all of this, it's really difficult for me to actually say what I think happened. I can see it from both sides, and that's probably one of the curses of being an attorney. I can kind of see prosecution, but I can also see defense. If we assume the worst of Nathan, this is a situation of, we may have somebody who literally killed their beloved grandfather and then killed their mother in order to get $7 million, which is a sizable amount, but it's not enough, at least in my opinion, to actually commit a murder, let alone two.
Yeah.
But if we think of Nathan in the best light, that this was just somebody who is a victim of circumstance, we still have a situation of his family, his aunts, were really convinced that he had committed these crimes because of money. And the thought that maybe he was innocent and dealing with the deterioration of all of his family relationships is just so sad. That looking at him in that kind of a light, I can kind of see that potentially suicide was the option that he may have picked. But this is just one of those cases where we're never going to know what happened. It doesn't matter what all of the court pleadings, all of the testimony over these different trials was. The people who actually know what happened are gone, and we're never going to know the real truth of it all.
Well, even if you could bring John back to life and send him into a time machine to redraft his estate plan, what could he possibly have done differently to prevent all this bad acting, the murders, everything that kind of happened after the fact?
In my opinion, there's really not a whole lot more he could have done. I don't think, in a lot of cases, you can't assume people are going to act a certain way when money is involved. This is, I suppose, a really unconventional or maybe unpopular take from an estate planning attorney.
Okay.
But maybe you'll agree with me on this one, just from your philosophy as a financial advisor. I think this is one of those situations where the more money you can spend that you've made, the better.
Okay.
If you don't leave a crazy amount of money to your family, there may not be this level of infighting that happens. So would this have happened over a $2 million estate as opposed to a $40+ million estate? Maybe, but probably not.
Yeah, I think there's an Italian turn of phrase that says that money exchanges between long sleeves to short sleeves to long sleeves to short sleeves, something like that. It has something to do with the fact that there's people who roll up their sleeves, get to work, and build incredible things.
Yes.
And then that makes it such that that asset, that business, that money transfers to people who didn't really earn it, right?
Yep.
So they're wearing the long sleeves, they're enjoying the fruits of all of this.
Exactly.
But they tend to either spoil themselves or others. And then the next thing you know, the money's gone, and the next generation has to roll up their sleeves again, right?
Exactly.
I think a lot of times people imagine that an inheritance is just going to make other people's lives better. And we know by so much in the way of extensive study that people's problems aren't really solved through money.
Yeah.
You know, there's if you need money to solve a problem, and this is true for some people because they're just in a dire strait or whatnot, a couple bucks might help you out. But a lot of times the reason that we have problems is because we're unhappy with our relationships or feel unfulfilled, and money sometimes exacerbates a lot of that.
It absolutely does. And again, thinking of Nathan in the kindest light that we can, I think maybe he would have felt that the real legacy from his grandfather probably wasn't the money, but it might have been all of the time that they spent together, him learning the businesses and spending all that time with his grandfather. They just seemed so close that I feel like if I were really to try and empathize with him, I imagine those experiences and those memories would always have meant more than any amount of money could, because he was giving Nathan kind of the life experience to keep the business going. And I know pretty much, just like as a parent, I can imagine as a grandparent, it's similar. John never intended any of this to happen. He would have hated the thought of his family completely deteriorating because of the success he had. So spending the money in life, I think, is sometimes the best, even if it is watching people spend it while you're there.
Yeah.
Just making sure that you're not leaving burden behind, because this, regardless of whether Nathan did it or not, and we'll truly never know, it is a tragedy. It's a situation where 3 people are dead within a 10-year period of time from the same family.
Yeah.
And that family will never be the same again.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I'm a big proponent that you've saved your own money. You should spend it on yourself, right? You should enjoy it while you can. Absent that, I think sometimes people think a little bit too myopically in terms of, well, whatever is unspent, where does it go? We just look in our family tree.
Yeah.
And, you know, he could have started a foundation or it had some charitable endeavors. And I think that would have been kind of an amazing thing. And I always encourage people to expand their horizons, because with family members, man, it's really tough, especially if you're skipping a generation and going to grandchildren.
It is.
When you're a grandparent, how well do you really know your grandkids? You know, you're seeing them a handful of times per year, and they're going to put on certain airs for you.
And you see them in a rosy light.
Yeah.
You know, you want to. That's kind of your right as a grandparent.
They're not going to let you know, like, what they're doing out in the city late at night with their pals or whatever. Like, so you're getting a version of them. And I think sometimes, too, what you can do is draft certain conditions into a trust to make sure they're behaving a certain way. We don't often see or necessarily recommend, like, a catch like you can't commit crimes and inherit money. I think that would be like kind of stating the obvious, but they could exhibit certain behavior or have spent a certain amount of time in the business before they were eligible to just take it over or inherit fruits from it. It just requires a lot of thought. And that's what I feel is like the big takeaway here, Liz. Oftentimes people will go to LegalZoom and they'll do like a will or a trust. It's kind of a paint by numbers thing. You're in and out inside of an hour and it's done. You name the characters that you care about. You illuminate the assets that you've got, and you figure, oh, my stuff's going to be split so many ways. Isn't that grand? There's real competing motivations here sometimes.
Yes.
You just mentioned here there was multiple daughters. They might not have all seen eye to eye. Maybe some of them want to run the practice. Maybe some of them don't, right? Maybe some of them want to keep the real estate. Maybe some of them won't. They're probably married, right? And now we've got in-laws like putting in their 2 cents. And a family like that, to me, is a family that's probably not going to stay together through the holidays once grandpa's gone. And so I think the real takeaway is you've got to slow this all down. And here's how I often encourage people. Like when I set them up, like, you're going to go meet with Liz in a week. Okay. You're going to have your consult, and they'll say, how do I prepare? Right? Like, what do I have to get together? And I think they first think I have to get a list of all of my assets, right? Because that's what I'm there to protect.
Absolutely.
And I often tell them, I really want you to think about your family on their worst day.
Yes.
Or just imagine what that worst day could possibly look like, right?
Yes.
Which of your kids has trouble holding down work? Which of your kids has a relationship that you're not exactly thrilled with? Which of your kids has exhibited any issues with, say, anxiety or depression, right? Throwing money at these people isn't just going to necessarily protect them, right? You might have to put additional protections in place to make sure if the money is even received in the first place, okay, that it's received in such a way that they still exhibit your values or behaviors that you would want them to exhibit, to be able to be in that position to get the money and then to later use it, because you have to imagine people at their worst before you even decide if you want them to have. And here's, I think, a great way of putting it, the temptation of all of this in their lives.
Yes.
Right? It can be divisive. It can send you down a wayward path. It could send you out at, like, here's what I want to know. What mom gets on a boat with their kid at like 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night to go fishing? What was she thinking?
I think she was just excited to spend time with her son,
I guess.
And
can we
maybe,
go out in the morning,
yeah,
Nathan? Something like that?
And that goes back to me just having a complete lack of the fishing industry altogether, because maybe that's just the best time. I don't know.
Liz, would you go out on a fishing boat in the middle of the night?
No, I would not, but I wouldn't also go out if it was too sunny.
Yeah.
Just because I'm at risk for getting like really badly sunburned. So I don't think I should be the litmus test for anything. But that definitely was, when I saw that little detail, I was like, that just, it seems weird, but it's probably just my ignorance at play.
Well, the good news here is that there are still many left undisturbed in the crypt, and I think that we're going to enjoy going back into the crypt at some point to try to learn other hard lessons from the realm of estate planning. If you liked what you saw here, like and subscribe, and join us next time as Liz and I go back into Tales from the Crypt.
If you liked this video and it helped you, watch another one, and don't forget to hit subscribe.